Hello, and welcome to the new episode of Dakota Boys Talk Movies. We're going to talk a movie. Isn't that surprising? Dakota, are you surprised that we're going to talk a movie? I am.
Well, I mean, I don't know anymore. We're talking about comics.
That's true. What other word can I just throw over movies, on our thing? We can talk coffee. Well, this is an episode talking about coffee. Who knows? It's really a crapshoot at this time what we'll end up talking about. But today we are talking about a movie. We're going to go back and talk about a movie that we both enjoy. I'm realizing now it's 18 years old, which is kind of
2000.
In one sense is like, yeah, that makes sense. But in another sense is like, that was 18 years ago?
2003 was a lifetime ago, man.
Oh, man, yeah.
It was a different world back then.
It was. I mean, we were scared of terrorists, but we weren't wearing masks everywhere. We were just kissing everybody, scratching ourselves and touching stuff. It was just a great time. It was a good time to be alive.
You could just randomly sneeze on strangers and they wouldn't pull a pistol on you.
It was funny you say that because I was just watching something and I'm trying to remember what it was. Oh, it was somebody yelling. And they were just yelling right near everybody's faces. And I was just thinking now, man, now they have me so trained where I just think about all the droplets hitting people and how we're supposed to be. It's just ridiculous. Anyway, let's forget about that. We're going to go back to that simple time of 2003 and talk about Master and Commander, The Far Side of the World. Partially because
yes,
it is based on a book with that name. And it's from a book series where I think probably they were hoping to be able to make more of the books into film.
Yeah, that was really the plan. Unfortunately, even though this movie was marketed as kind of like a big, almost like a Michael Bay type movie where it was just going to be explosions and fighting and death and
it wasn't.
No.
I mean, it did have explosions, it did have fighting, and I think this could be an example of marketing possibly hurting it by people feeling betrayed by what to expect. And I think the other thing, too, that was maybe hurting it is that you have, it gets marketed that maybe because of the lead actor being Russell Crowe, not fresh off Gladiator, but soon after Gladiator. And it's kind of Gladiator was considered this big, sword and sandals epic, and so it's this is his next big epic. And in a weird sense, even though this is a big movie, it's kind of has more of a quieter tone to it. It isn't quite as just bombastic, I guess, in a lot of ways. And I'm not saying that as a knock either. This movie takes place in, I believe, 1805. I don't know. It's in the middle of the Napoleonic Wars, anyway. And you follow this British ship as they are basically on a mission to find this French ship. And and so you kind of go on their journey. So it kind of becomes more of a ocean-spanning adventure, really, and kind of the things, the little hijinks along the way, little side quests, so to speak, that they get into along the way. Let's just go into some of the highlights of this movie. Number one, they must have done this on a real ship. They had to have, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's just you feel so there. It had to be.
Yeah, they really don't make movies like this anymore. Mostly because, I believe they actually did use a ship. They didn't just a set, They actually had the boat and everything and used that. And yeah, it's just in a way it's bad. In a way I think it's unfortunate we don't really get movies like this because this is just it's not, the fate of the world is hanging on us. If we don't, destroy this ship, we're not, it's going to be pandemonium and there's there's just going to be, our homes are going to be destroyed. It's just a very simple story here.
Yeah, I would say like the actual story is simple. You're kind of more just kind of on their journey with them. Um, but yeah, I just did just verify that this was intended to be the first entry in a franchise because I think the book series has like 27 books or something ridiculous.
Oh, yeah.
Just a huge number of books. And another thing too is there is like this huge storm in one part of the movie, and apparently there was two cameramen that were able to get on board a ship, a replica of James Cook's ship that was circumnavigating the globe at the time they were filming, and they were actually able to film an actual stormy sea and incorporate that into the movie, and that's why it was so like realistic looking because it was.
Really?
So it kind of helped with things like this. And that's the thing. This movie in 2003, which I know it isn't that long ago, but we're realizing it kind of is, had a $150 million budget, which now would probably be $7 trillion in today's money. No, I was kidding. No, but I mean, I think, even a $150 million movie today is a pretty big deal, and so this movie had all of the money put behind it. It had all of the talent put behind it. And it was just that what stopped it was low box office numbers because everything else about it, critics liked it. It was nominated for Academy Awards. I mean, there was these things that were happening for it. It just didn't quite pan out in terms of becoming like a franchise or anything. But yeah, just another thing is that a big part of this movie is that Russell Crowe, our captain, who's kind of a rascally devil at times, he actually learned to play. There's a big part of this movie is him playing violin a lot, and that's kind of his go-to for kind of like, I would say, maybe kind of recentering himself. It's kind of his therapy thing. And he actually learned to play violin for this movie, which is kind of crazy to think about. I would say one of the parts I remember really kind of striking me is when the cabin boy had to have his arm cut off.
Yeah.
It really, yeah, it just brought you into the reality of how hard of a life this was and the fact that all of these ships had for sure one boy on them who was a part of all this mess. Well, he wasn't a cabin boy. I shouldn't say that. He was, wasn't he like a young lad that was attempting to learn how to be an officer one day?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I said that wrong. I take that back. Because his whole deal was he was always kind of around the officers because he must have been from some sort of family that wanted him to aspire to be an officer.
Either that or, his family just, to help make ends meet, just let him go into the Navy to
I guess maybe
free up some resources. I mean, this movie takes place in a time where things weren't so what's the word I'm looking for here? Decent, I guess.
Yeah. You just like, I don't know, I guess top to bottom when you just look at this movie, like every part of it feels real, but it's really they just put a lot of care, I think, into getting it real. And part of it is when you have Russell Crowe as your lead, he's kind of one of those method actors where he likes to have everything in a particular way so that he can really feel the role, which is why he taught himself violin, I'm sure. And then Paul Bettany is just a quality actor too. And he's kind of the doctor on the ship. And in a lot of ways, well, not in a lot of ways, he really just is the captain's kind of confidant. It's like even though there's all these first mates and stuff, those are the two that kind of have like this, even though they butt heads at times, there's like a mutual respect for one another in their friendship. They have this love of music that they share together, but then also it just feels like he's just the guy the captain is able to kind of be a little more real, like share like some concerns with, and not feel usurped or judged and things like that. And so I thought those two really played well off each other, but this was their second movie together because they would have done A Beautiful Mind, and that would have been before this.
Yeah, unless they did something else together that I'm not aware
Yeah,
of.
and I guess you got a sense of their they had good chemistry, whatever you want to call it, in Beautiful Mind too.
Yeah.
So I guess I just kind of carried over into this.
One of the main high points of this movie, though, I think is, man, Russell Crowe. He's a famous actor, but he's not as big now as he was then. But he is so charismatic in this movie.
Yeah.
Yeah. You have some actors who I don't think would have been able to handle this role. Not him, though. He showed up, and what's interesting about this too. I remember hearing in the books apparently his character was actually supposed to be pretty, kind of on the hefty side. But,
okay, sure.
But yeah, Russell Crowe apparently was just so athletic. He was like,
yeah, this would have been the time when he was just trimmer, because now he's kind of filled out a little bit again.
Yeah, but he just apparently from the get-go refused to try to put on weight or I'm surprised they didn't even try to like get him to wear a fat suit maybe.
Well, yeah, he would never wear a fat suit. He would just gain weight. That's kind of how he rolls.
But he is very physical in this movie, so
yeah, the other interesting thing I saw was that this movie in the book, the events of this movie, they're going against an American ship because it takes place in 1812, but that they actually dated this movie back to the Napoleonic Wars, so it could be a French ship, probably so that American audiences would like it. because American audiences not so much would probably want to see Americans being the kind of more bad guy in a movie, whereas we're all okay with the French being bad guys, right, Dakota?
Right. Is that why maybe they say this French boat was built in America during the Revolutionary War?
Maybe.
Did they just they're like, oh, we're just gonna, it's in the script, it's too late to change it, we're just gonna go with it.
Yeah, just we'll change it to that. So
yeah. For those of you who are wondering what I'm referring to, the ship they're attempting to hunt down is a newer vessel that apparently has been designed better. So
yeah, that's the idea.
Yeah. And it's, which I don't really know about ships or anything, but apparently this thing was more, I think, maneuverable. It wasn't like the Bismarck, the giant battleship in World War II that got sunk.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was just supposed to be technologically a lot faster of a ship.
Yeah, because their ship was considered old, I think, and by old it was like what?
I believe he said aged in the
aged.
It's a more aged vessel.
Yeah. But maybe it'll get the job done. I think another highlight of this movie is just the Galapagos. The fact that they were actually able to film at the Galapagos, which you could tell. I mean, they didn't fake it, and I can tell you now too that they didn't fake it. They actually got permission. I think this is one of the only movies to actually film at the Galapagos.
Really?
And so I think that was why the director, Peter Weir, really took his time to... There's a couple shots where they just kind of show animals moving, and it's really like, well, geez, if we're going to be able to film in the Galapagos, let's take advantage of the fact that they're letting us do that. And then I think what this movie has that would just... I just don't think will ever happen again is that this movie really relied on replicas, being on real ships, and using miniatures over CGI. Because I haven't seen In the Heart of the Sea. We brought that up on our podcast before. But even with the previews, you can just tell it's a lot of CGI work. And in this movie, it's just like, you feel all the splinters. You see them moving around these ships, and it's because they're on replica versions, or even in the scenes where it's like, they need to capture some sort of maybe action moment, it's using miniatures, which all of that adds to realism because our eyes can only be tricked so far. Dakota, I would say for the most part, what percentage of the time do you recognize something as CGI and you just kind of have to ignore it and just be like, yeah, I know it's CGI, but
Oh, often.
Yeah, definitely more often than not. There's only a few times, and part of it is you do get kind of sometimes do get surprised like what was CGI because sometimes they do like legitimately trick you. But I'm talking about like in terms of these scenes where you need to capture like big moments. Now it's just CGI.
Yeah.
Whereas in this, you know, you were feeling the splinters a lot of the time, and again, I think it's because they were using replicas and miniatures, which are is a tangible thing, and so even though it's still they're still faking it in a sense, they're still our eyes are still understanding that something physical is having something happen to it, and it's not in this weird digital nebulous that what do they call it, the uncanny valley.
Yeah.
And so I think there's a respectability to that with this movie that I just don't know if we'd ever get again unless we reverted back to doing more of that.
Which I don't think is going to happen anytime soon, unfortunately.
I mean, you have directors who try to use more miniatures and models and things like that. You know, and now who I'm talking about, I guess, is like Christopher Nolan. Even like The Mandalorian, you know, they were trying to do more in the space real, you know, in their world real things, tangible things they were touching. But yeah, I don't know. It's just I think it's just cheaper to go digital most of the time, and so it's hard for the movie studios to justify like, well, if there's a cheaper option that is still making box office money, why aren't we just doing that instead? You know, I think that's kind of what it comes down to.
Yeah.
And so
I think some directors too probably go a little overboard with the CGI. Like, oh, we'll just do CGI. It'll be cheaper.
yeah,
Without really thinking of, oh, how is this actually going to look on screen? Will it be realistic? Mad Max Fury Road actually had a ton of CGI in it, but it wasn't stuff you'd see. Like there wasn't like a CGI car like off in the distance coming up on the truck. It was, you know, they used it to basically make the area they were filming in look like a barren wasteland.
Yeah, and I think that's what played to. It's a tool, you know. It's a tool and it's a good tool.
Yeah.
But the people who did Mad Max Fury Road knew we still need these cars to be real, and so they actually built these ridiculous Frankenstein cars, and so those were all really there. And because those are all really there, when your foreground stuff is really there, you know, that helps. That helps kind of, and you're just kind of using your CGI as the tool to help enhance that stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's always going to play out. And I feel like some filmmakers are learning that, and then some just are never going to learn. It just feels like they're never going to learn it, you know, where it's just like, are you ever going to just stop making everything so cartoony, you know?
You know, we probably talk about Zack Snyder a little too much on this show.
You do.
Oh, okay. I feel called out all of a sudden. But no, I honestly thought that's how he was going to go because, you know, he made 300. And I remember we were getting like these glimpses from Watchmen. And I was like, tell me he's not just CGIing the crap out of everything. Tell me there's actually, you may not remember it, but I do. It was, they kind of came up with a poster for each character. And they
For Watchmen?
Yeah. Like the comedian had one, Night Owl had one, Rorschach had one, Silk Spectre, the first one had one. But yeah, it looked nice until you actually like started looking at it. And you're like, this looks so fake. Like I just started to worry. Like, is he gonna be like that guy, or he just CGIs the crap out of everything?
Yeah. Well, and I mean, if there was anything, probably the easiest thing to knock about MCU movies is there's some of them that have way too much CGI.
What are you talking about? Thor: The Dark World is just like one of the most entertaining MCU movies ever.
Well, and that wasn't even one I was thinking of right off the top of my head.
As far as backgrounds go, I think that had to have been mostly green screen, wasn't it?
Yeah, well, now that you bring it up, yeah, because even when they go to that weird, dark, well, probably the dark world,
Yeah.
yeah, it was green. It looked pretty green screeny, and that was 2013. That was 10 years after the movie we're talking about today,
Oh.
and so, yeah, I mean, that's one of the things I hope they kind of learn from these movies. And like I said, I think you have your bright spots, like the Christopher Nolans and and maybe even some of these new Star Warsy things where, yeah, Rogue One and even Mandalorian to an extent, where especially the first season of Mandalorian, where I feel like they were really trying to go for a practical effect. Look, the second season had so much more scope to it, where I think they ended up having to do more CGI.
I find it intriguing that ever since the prequels, everyone's kind of whole thing is we can't use too much CGI because that's what was wrong with the prequels. They used too much CGI. Like that was the only thing.
Yeah, that was a thing that was a problem with the sequels, but it's definitely not the only thing.
But yeah, at the time, I remember thinking, man, this CGI looks so good. These clones just getting massacred look great.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely had this cartoony look that even though maybe Yoda jiggled a little bit in the originals because he was a puppet or whatever, there was still something endearing, and you still believed who he was in that. That just kind of got lost. That
Yeah.
kind of gets lost in this cartooniness. But yeah, and so those when you look back at Master and Commander, that's just a respectable thing of it. Now, as far as the crew on this, I think the crew is really tight. They feel like an actual crew. I know part of what they did was Russell Crowe would always get rugby games going to build camaraderie with them, and things like that. Of course, you got to do rugby because they're all British or Australian, and so can't just play, like baseball or football. Those are too American. But there was things like that, and then I don't know. It just like I think you just saw this was in hands of a capable director too. Now Peter Weir, he's done a lot of movies and over his career. Where would you put this? Would this be maybe one of your favorite Weirs?
Yeah, I would definitely say so.
Okay, yeah, because just for reference, for those of you who aren't able to look him up as you're listening to us talk about it, he's done movies like Witness, Truman Show, Mosquito Coast. What was that other one we were talking about? The big one, Dead Poet Society. He's done these types of movies that have really, a lot of them hold up in their own ways. Like even ones like Witness, where maybe elements of it are like, oh, those the dirty cops of it feel pretty 80s, but the movie as a whole still holds up.
Yeah.
Truman Show, even though the technology of how they did the cameras and it is dated and stuff, the idea and everything behind it still holds up. It still has this the story and the characters. I mean, you can just see when you look at his movies, you see that he is apparently a director who just gets that character and story need to really work together well to carry your movie to be good. Because I mean, that's what all of his movies. You feel like that's what's strong in all of his movies. Because now that I think about it, some of his biggest ones are all simple plots when you think about it. But it's because he's focusing on the character in that story and the drive of that. And so maybe that's just must be what he's good at or what he's drawn to.
Yeah. Just throwing this out there real quick. The cinematography in this movie is actually beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
I said earlier, I don't think they make them like this anymore. You look at the cinematography, I don't think they really do make them like this, like ever. But really, some really just awesome shots in this movie here for fans of cinematography.
Yeah, it's and the cinematographer is an Australian guy named Russell Boyd. He's worked with Peter Weir in the past on Gallipoli, which I think is a Dakota favorite. And but he's done everything from Crocodile Dundee to to this one. And so I mean, but yeah, he just apparently has an eye for it. But um it looks like maybe nautical is his thing. He must like being on the sea, and so yeah, he must have just been really understanding how to capture that, which is probably why he got the job. So, because when you look at his pictures, when you look him up, it's like him looking all Popeye the Sailor Man-y and in the ocean. So it's apparently just he understood how to film that. Yeah, because you're right. It's just like I don't know. This is like when you think about film, this is a film.
Yeah, this is the sort of movie that this is basically what big screens are made for, movie theater screens. Because I mean, it's not like you don't really have a choice now, but seeing this on the big screen I think would be a real treat.
Yeah, this would be a fun one to maybe come back to because I know when we brought this up in the past as a possibility talking about, didn't you say there's been kind of a resurgence of people appreciating this movie now?
Yeah. I think it was nominated for a couple Academy Awards, but I don't think
it was nominated for like 8 or 10.
Oh.
And won 2.
Oh, awesome.
But it was the same year as Return of the King.
Ooh.
When Return of the King, but here's what it won for, and this won't surprise you, Dakota. Cinematography. It won for cinematography, so Russell Boyd got his and best sound editing. I'm
surprised Lord of the Rings didn't take that one too.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It's like, good on you for getting that. But when I was thinking about that, there is, I mean, that is just another thing that had to bring you into this world was the sound, of course, besides how it looked. But yeah, I mean, it was nominated for Best Picture, Best Director, Best Editing, Best Art Direction, Best Costume Design, Best Makeup, Best Sound Mixing, Best Visual Effects. But this was just the year that Return of the King was winning in a lot of those technical categories. And so that is cool that this one was able to still pull in the cinematography and sound editing, being that it was having to be against something like Return of the King, which was, you knew was kind of got to be the golden boy that year at the award show. So this is kind of how it was going to be, which we've talked about this in the past, but I still feel like Fellowship of the Ring is the strongest of the three, even though I like them all. But of course, when you have the last movie in a trilogy coming out, that's the one you usually end up appreciating the most at the award shows. So, but no, I think that is cool that it still got those things. We should see. Let's see if there's any Golden Globes here. It did get nominated for a couple Golden Globes. It got Best Picture, of course. These are just nominations. Best Performance, Russell Crowe.
Nice.
And Best Director, Peter Weir. But of course, it did win at the BAFTAs, which is the British Academy Awards, correct, Dakota?
Yeah, but no one cares about that, so we just move on. I'm kidding. Yeah.
But it did win, director, sound, costume design, production design, best film. Nope, sorry, just nominated there for best film. But yeah, so it won some BAFTAs too. And it won the AFI Award for Movie of the Year. So that's pretty cool. Yeah. So that was the thing. This was critically liked. The only thing I can figure is why it didn't do well at the box office was that maybe it was kind of overshadowed in that Lord of the Rings shadow a little bit. I'm trying to remember when this was released. But then also it was just one of those things where, we talked about the marketing was all about in a world where Russell Crowe blows up everything on the ocean. Maybe they did kind of market it a little bit too much like that.
Yeah.
And it was a little bit more just adventure drama.
This would have been well after, before Pirates of the Caribbean, right?
This would have been
2003.
Didn't Pirates of the Caribbean come? The first one I think came out in 2003.
Was it?
Yeah.
Oh, I was gonna say I think because he would have had that crowd who, if it came out before and they saw this, it would have been essentially I don't know, two sides of the same coin. But this one being more of a dramatic, serious film, I don't think that same crowd would have gave it any love.
Yeah. This was released a month before Return of the King.
I mean, yeah, there's some movies where the marketing was just terrible. Anyone who's ever seen Public Enemies, the trailer for it made it look like it was just going to be, Tommy guns blaring for 2 hours.
That's true.
Johnny Depp's John Dillinger just romancing dames, just
Yeah, and once again, it was kind of more of a Michael Mann drama.
yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, just kind of a mixture of things, And I think part of it, too, is it would have been an intellectual property that would have had a limited fan base. And how do you teach people about something quick enough for them to go to your movie? Because, I mean, you would have had the people who knew the book series, who were probably there, ready to see it. But you wouldn't have had the other people, your normals, your normal moviegoers.
Yeah, I'm just remembering now. I think Charlton Heston, of all people, was like a huge fan of the book series.
I could see that.
And I think he was one of the few that was actually hoping this was like gonna be a new franchise.
Yeah, in fact, I tried to borrow the book series from him, but he said, "Get your filthy paws off my." I'm just kidding.
No. I was gonna say
I feel like this is a book series that Ted Turner would say he was a fan of too, and was hoping to make some TNT original movies of. It just feels like, something that Turner would want to get his hands on. But thankfully, we got to see a big budget version. So
yeah, I was gonna say this movie kind of exists in those vein how A&E used to make movies.
Yeah, like the Horatio Hornblower series,
the Scarlet Pimpernel. Yeah.
Those Horatio Hornblowers are worth a look, though. It's got a Ioan Griffith, the guy who played Mr. Fantastic in those two Fantastic Four movies, played Horatio Hornblower. Yeah, kind of in that vein a little bit.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I would say this was one to either, if you're one who recalls seeing it, I would recommend revisiting. Or if it's one that you just were like, I think I remember seeing some sort of ship cover with Russell Crowe at one point in a bin somewhere or on my dad's movie shelf, or something. Yeah, I would say, give it a try. It's not like it's one of those 4-hour epics. It's like, a little over a couple hours. It's not too bad. And I feel like it moves along.
Yeah, definitely. I know we didn't do this story any justice explaining it to you, but it's not one of those like, oh man, we're just watching these people, at sea for 2 hours.
And it's kind of one of those things where, like Dakota said, the story is pretty simple, and it almost has like kind of that Mary Poppins thing or Jungle Book. I feel like when you watch Mary Poppins or Jungle Book, those Disney movies, instead of just being like a linear story, there is a linear story there, but it's almost like there's vignettes. It's like, now they're at the, Mary Poppins, like, now they're at the tea party place. Now they jump into chalk, and it's kind of like these. And I feel like that's a little bit how Master and Commander is, where it's like, even though there is this thread that goes through it all, it's kind of like there's these kind of pieces to the story along the way that are all kind of part of this bigger journey. And so, yeah, I don't, and I was just thinking, with Paul Bettany being the co-star in this, people are talking about him a lot right now because of WandaVision being on Disney Plus and going over pretty well, that this would be a good movie to go revisit. Kind of a good Paul Bettany movie, which would have been before he became part of the MCU too, and just kind of see that he has some really good dramatic acting chops too, and kind of plays a character who just wants to learn. He's just kind of like, he's kind of this guy who's just like obsessed with gaining knowledge and learning things.
Yeah, he's had a kind of an interesting career. The albino monk in Da Vinci Code, I thought.
Try to forget about that. Yeah. Kind of went, I don't know. I think he was really trusting his beautiful mind director, Ron Howard, on that one. So that was interesting. But yeah, so we both give this one a strong recommend for you to check out or recheck out.
2 thumbs way up.
Two thumbs way up. Man, that's kind of a dead thing, isn't it? The whole 2 thumbs up.
Yeah.
Now with Siskel and Ebert, and then Ebert and Roper and all that being over, but yeah.
Well, you know what, Steven? I like to think they live on through us.
They do. They do. We're just trying to carry on that tradition. started by.
We're still carrying the torch, man.
I would assume that you're the Ebert.
Oh, okay.
I don't know. Like, I don't know which one's worse to be. I'm the one who's gonna die first, I guess, is what that means.
I was gonna say whichever one was more willing to take chances on movies, because I probably watch a lot of weird stuff just to.
I feel like that's Ebert. Ebert seems to be the one. I mean, the guy did write a sequel to Valley of the Dolls or whatever. So.
Oh.
But anyway, Master and Commander: Far Side of the World from 2003. It's pretty easy to find. It's probably out there on a streaming service, I would guess. It's been around long enough where I would think somebody has it.
Oh, I'm trying to remember who put this movie out. I can't remember if it was Fox or Warner Brothers.
I thought Fox.
Okay, I didn't say wouldn't it be on Disney Plus? Like I know sometimes
it's not on Disney Plus.
I know sometimes you have to go looking for stuff on Disney Plus, but
yeah, I don't remember, but I thought it was a Fox movie. Yeah, so maybe it's even on Hulu if it's a Fox movie. Universal. So it might be on Peacock or something like that. Who knows? But I'm sure it's out there, and it's been around long enough where I'm sure it's somewhere to find. And so, yeah, well, anyway, we thank you for listening to this episode where we kind of dove back in time a little ways to a simpler time. A simpler time where we were just fighting terrorists in the Middle East. Yeah, to Master and Commander: The Far Side of the World, where they were just, in their simple time of scurvy, syphilis, and, half the world being at war. So that's fun, too. If you're not catching on, what I'm getting at is there's never been a simpler time, people. Just understand that and move on. Anyway, on that note, thanks for listening to this episode. You can find us in all those places. Give us your opinion on what you thought of this movie or what you feel about if this is a simpler time or not, or if we've never had a simpler time. You can find us on Facebook, YouTube, any of those places. Give us likes, reviews, suggestions, any of that. We love it all. Nearly all of it. Dakota, is there anything we don't love? I mean, we even love a good criticism. We feed on that.
Well, I was just going to throw out we don't like the Twilight movies, which is a stand I am willing to die for.
I don't think it's really that hard of a hill to die on. So, but thanks for listening. This is Steven.
This is Dakota.
Catch you next time on the far side of the world.
Ooh.